Hi Lissaman, hey everyone and welcome back to another episode of Learning Norwegian with Kai. So this is the second episode of this mini-series, and in the first episode I taught the basic words or the basic pronouns and some basic counting. Now in this episode we're going to look at the sentence structure and the vocal sounds that are made in Norwegian. So if you haven't not seen the first episodes, I will put a link in the description box below. So let's start with the sentence structure in Norwegian. So the first rule is that there always has to be a subject and a verb in a sentence. So for example, when I say I am Norwegian, I would say jeg er norsk. So jeg is I, which is the subject, and then am, so to be, would be er. So jeg er norsk. I am Norwegian. Then the second rule is that a verb is always in a second position and always after the subject, because it's always an action or something related. So it's always in the second position. So I would say, for example, han snakker norsk nå. He speaks Norwegian now, or he now speaks Norwegian. Han snakker, subject, and then the verb. Then the third rule is that the subject is always in the first or in the third position. So in Norwegian you can often flip a sentence around. So I can say jeg spiser mat. I eat food. And I is the subject and eat is the verb. Jeg spiser mat. But if you want to have the subject in the third position, you could be like nå spiser jeg mat. Now am I eating food. Nå spiser jeg. So you can often flip the subject and verb and it will still make sense. So now for the fourth rule is the negation. So in Norwegian, they are always after a verb. So when you say, for example, can't, so in Norwegian this is ikke, ikke. So in a sentence when I deny something, for example, I am not hungry, jeg er ikke sulten. So is the verb and ikke is the negation, so it's always after the verb. And now for the final rule from the sentence structure in Norwegian is adverbials. Adverbials are always in either the first or the last position. So, for example, nå, which is now. So, nå spiser jeg mat. Now I'm eating food. But you can also say, jeg spiser mat nå. So you can flip it over, and this with almost every single Norwegian sentence, you can always flip it and it will still make sense. So these were the 5 rules in the Norwegian sentence structure. And we will now move on to the vocal sounds. So I will only be touching upon the more important vocal sounds. So first of all, we're going to look at the letter D. So the D is most often silent in consonant clusters. Then we're going to move on to the G. The G is mostly silent in Norwegian. For example, the word for doing is gjøre. And the G will be silent because there's a J, so the G will always be silent before a J. But the G will also be silent after an I. So for example, the word for cheap in Norwegian is billig, but the G will be silent, billig. And then mostly it's not even pronounced. Some people do, but most people will not pronounce the G. It often depends on dialects, which is with most of the vocal sounds. Then with the H. The H is always silent before a V. So, for example, when I ask a question where, which is hvor, it's HVOR, but the H is silent. Then we're going to move on to the O. The O sound is a longer sound in Norwegian. So when I say the capital city of Norway is Oslo, in Norwegian you would say Oslo. It's a longer oo. Then we have some very special sounds. So in Norwegian, some words or some letters will be combined to create one vocal sound, the R and the S. In Norwegian, they are like a sh sound, really short. So, for example, when you say Norwegian in Norwegian, it's norsk, but the sound is silent. Then we move on to the final combination of letters that create one vocal sound in Norwegian, which is the sh sound. So the word for chicken in Norwegian is kylling. Kylling. The S and the K make a sh sound. Kylling. And now we move on to the T. The T is mostly silent in Norwegian. So for example, when I say it or that, it's det, which is D-E-T, but the T will never be pronounced. Then again, some dialects will, some people will. Some people have learned at a young age that they either should or should not pronounce the T, so it's often your preference. When you do learn Norwegian, when you do pronounce the T, it's often easier to perhaps remember. Then we have the U sound in Norwegian. The U sound sounds like the E and the W in new. So when you say like something is illegal, you would say uløve, uløve. So it's the U sound. And now we will move on to the three final letters and vocal sounds in Norwegian, which are the A, Ö, O, the three special letters as well, which are added to the alphabet. So the first one is the A. The A is like the A in ad or the A in apple. A. Then we have the Ö. It doesn't really have a similar letter or word in English. When you say birds, birds, that's the sound that you're going to look for. Bird. Then for the final vocal sound, we have the O. O. So O is actually used a lot in Norwegian. The same goes for Swedish and Danish. So the O is like the O in open or old. O. Open, old. So those were the Norwegian vocal sounds. So now we have reached the end of the video. I want to thank all of you for watching, and I hope that I learned you something today. So we spoke about the vocal sounds and the sentence structure in Norwegian. And in the next episode, we will look at some basic words and we will go over the verbs that are mostly used in Norwegian. So until then, vises!